Please sit down. We met very.
Hi. Cool. Sorry, that was kind of loud. Cool. I don't like the way this is angled. Oops. Oh. Sorry. Yay. Okay. Thank you all for coming out here. It's super awesome, and it's amazing that that you're here. Sorry. Okay. My name is Denise DeGretti. I'm the president of Students for Holocaust Awareness, and this is our 20th annual Holocaust Awareness Week at CSU. So it's really cool that you all could be here for this milestone. So tonight we're gonna welcome Miss Marthe Cohn and her husband Major to our beautiful campus. And there's a lot of CSU faculty and staff that I would like to welcome as well, and CSU city and Colorado state dignitaries. So I'd like to welcome Fort Collins Mayor Wade Troxel, Executive Vice President and Provost Rick Miranda. This is really tall. There we go. Assistant Dean of Students John Henderson, State Senator John Koufalas, City Council members Ray Martinez, Chris Steffens, and Bob Overbeck, Air Force ROTC Commander Colonel Kip B. Terrain, Chief of CSU Police Scott Harris, Executive Dining and Housing Mary Strombaum, I'll take a break in between each, I don't know, okay. Director of Residence Life Laura Giles, Faculty Advisor H.J. Siegel, representing ASCSU is Michael Wells, Vice President Cole Wise, Finance Chair Robert Leonard, and Chief of Staff Eddie Kendall. Yay. Yay. There's still more, I'm sorry, that was misleading. Representative of Congressman Jared Polis, Stuart Feinher, sorry if I butchered that. Fort Collins City Manager Darren Addyberry, Assistant City Manager Kelly DiMartino. And yes, now that was all of them. Yay. Okay, I'm not gonna look that way again. Of course, thank you to all the CSU faculty and staff, and most importantly, all the CSU students and community members that took time out of your day to be here. And I want to thank CSU and the LSC Laurie Student Center staff for supporting us and hosting our events and making this possible and setting up this room in such a beautiful way. And I want to thank Kate Jiraki and the CSU Media Relations team. They're wonderful. And of course, I want to thank the Students for Holocaust Awareness, the student org, because without them, this would not be possible. So that includes me, Lindsay Upton-Spatz, Alex Wertheimer, I'm sorry if I butchered that, Alicia Bridges, Momo Yan, Garrett Newell, Sarah Convisar, Will Sharp, Ben Cartwright, and Alana Kashi. Sorry. Yay, they're all awesome. This event would not be possible without them. And I also want to thank our wonderful staff advisors for Students for Holocaust Awareness, H.J. Siegel, Rabbi Yerachmiel Gorlik of Chabad, and Alex Amchi of Hillel for their tireless support. And this, I mean, there's so many people that go into like this event. It would not be possible without anyone I just listed. And I also want to thank, I'm sorry, this is so long, AEPI, the Jewish fraternity, SAEPI, the Jewish sorority, Hillel and Chabad, and yeah, so I just want to say thanks again for everyone being here so we can remember and honor all of those who we lost in the Holocaust and also just honor those that experienced it. So tonight is our keynote event, An Evening with the Survivor. So we have several events this week. We already did the Field of Flags, which was last Friday, and each flag represents 5,000 who perished, and there's about 2,000 flags set up. Then that's outside the LSC. You can see it if you want. We do a litany of names every single day, Monday through Thursday, from 10 to 2 p.m. So if you want to help out with that, that'd be cool. We'll be on the plaza. And then we're doing a memorial service on Friday and retiring the Field of Flags. Along with that, AEPI is going to be doing their memorial Walk to Remember, honoring those who perished. So you can find more information on our website. I don't think it's up there, but you can find more information on our website, holocaust.colostate.edu. Okay, and of course, the guest of honor, thank you so much to Miss Marthe Cohn. We are so grateful that she came here to share her story with all of us. Yes. Yay. And her wonderful husband, Major, also for joining. Please, yeah. Please make sure that your cell phones are off. That would be super lame if your cell phone went off in the middle of this. So don't do that. Thank you. Put it on vibrate or whatever. It doesn't have to be off, but I don't want to hear it. No one wants to hear it. Afterwards, we are going to be having a Q&A. So I think shortly we're going to be broadcasting the email on which you can send your questions, and Momo will be the one who will be facilitating the Q&A with Marthe, so you can ask questions that you think of during her speech. So yeah, that'll be cool. Also, we're going to be selling books afterwards. They're pre-order though, but she will be signing them. So yeah, cool. So Tony Frank, our CSU president, could not be here. However, he did want to share a few words with the CSU community and the Fort Collins community to, I guess, just show solidarity and unity. So they'll be showing that right now. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Colorado State University President Tony Frank. Tonight's program is a privilege to share in the wisdom and experience of a remarkable woman who not only survived the horrors of the Holocaust, but fought back against Nazi oppression with enormous courage and at great personal risk. We cannot forget stories like Mrs. Cohn's. We cannot stay silent in the face of fascism, terror, and hate. We must unfailingly stand together against those evils and those who perpetrate them. I deeply regret that I can't be with you this evening, but I wanted to acknowledge how profoundly we all have been affected by the rising tide of anti-Semitism and racism, globally, nationally, and here at home at CSU. And I want to let you know that this university and I, both as CSU president and personally, are with you now and in the future, in support and in solidarity. Thank you to the Students for Holocaust Awareness Week and all members of our community for gathering together to honor our history and support the marginalized and vulnerable on our campus and in our community. It has been said that any terror is most effective in the isolation and silence of our minds. But we know this evil. We have met it before, and we are not afraid to call it by its name. And so we say to it, not here, not now, not anywhere ever again, because we will never forget. We know you, and we will together defeat you. Peace. Shalom.
Okay, cool. So we have a couple other people speaking before the event really starts. So the next person that will speak that I'd like to invite is the Mayor Wade Traxel to share a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you all for being here tonight. What a wonderful crowd to come out. And welcome, Mr. and Ms. Cohn. Glad you're here. And welcome to Fort Collins. You know, Fort Collins is a welcoming, inclusive, and open community for all. And today's Holocaust remembrance is a critical, important event in the light of, and especially in light of our times today with increased anti-Semitism and racism globally, nationally, and even locally. The city of Fort Collins supports and embraces the Jewish community and all targeted groups and stands against hate and intolerance. Ms. Marthe Cohn, the wonderful, sweet woman that I've met tonight, is an example of our human spirit and our humanity. She not only is a survivor of the Holocaust, but at great risk to her life to fight against Nazism. And to be here tonight and to share with us her story. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Look forward to your comments. Thank you. Together, as a community, as Fort Collins community, as a CSU community, let us come together, stand together, and always be vigilant. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And now I would also like to welcome Alex Amchi, the director of Hillel, to the stage to share a few words.
What an amazing turnout. Can we give a round of applause to Denise and the Students for Holocaust Awareness? And especially to our wonderful guests who flew all the way from Los Angeles to join us tonight. Thank you. It's an honor to be able to share a few words with you all today. Believe it or not, Holocaust Awareness Week has been around for over 20 years at CSU. And we have learned so much more about the Holocaust in that time, and we still have so much more to learn. As of today, Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Museum, has collected over 4.5 million names of individuals with a story who perished, and over 26,000 righteous among the nations who protected their Jewish neighbors at a time when hostility and indifference prevailed. Many see the last 100 years as the most progressive chapter in human history: science, industrial revolution, iPhones. However, those same ideas and tools were used simultaneously to murder and destroy whole societies. Millions of Armenians, Assyrians, Cambodians, Rwandans, Russians, and Kurds, and others were killed by self-destructive nationalist leaders. However, in none of those situations were the victims so methodically murdered in such a scientific manner as the Nazi Germans. In fact, most of what we know about their deeds comes from their very own efficient records. How could we let such promising ideas and tools be allowed to destroy human lives and families? It means that we have not learned history's lessons. We are here today to learn. The Jewish people hold learning and memory as two of our most important ideals, something that has allowed us to survive for thousands of years. I ask you to do 3 things today. First, sit and listen to Martha's story. Let her words simmer in your conscience. Second of all, ask questions. Later today, you will have a chance during the Q&A after the presentation. The last and most important step is when you leave this room today. What are you going to do about it? Spending a couple hours in a room together is a start, but it is not enough. Is there over 1,000 people here today? What can we all accomplish together, even if we just volunteer $1 or 15 minutes of our time? What are you going to do next time you see someone attacked on our campus? What are you going to do next time you see something happen in the city of Fort Collins? Holocaust awareness is not just about the past, but it needs to inform our present. We are all incredibly powerful. It is taught by our sages that one who kills someone kills the whole world, and someone who saves a life saves the whole world. Remember that every time you meet someone, you may have the chance to change their life and to save the whole world.
Okay, this is the last time I'll be up here. Thank you again, all of you, for coming. It means so much to me and the students of Holocaust Awareness Group that you all came out here. So now I'd like to welcome Rabbi Rachmel Gorelick to introduce Mart. Yay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, faculty, students, community members. It's a great honour once again to introduce our speaker here tonight, our survivor. And thank yous have been made, but once again, thank you to the Students for Holocaust Awareness Week who worked so hard, and everybody else who was already thanked. This event couldn't happen without you. Standing room only. Look at this. Amazing. Thank you. Big round of applause. It's become increasingly rare to be able to hear living testimony from a Holocaust survivor. And we feel here at the university, with the support of the university, that's our duty and our privilege to create those opportunities for the last generation who can bear testimony and hear firsthand accounts from these heroes. CSU has been very privileged in past years, and we are very privileged to all be here tonight. Finding a Holocaust survivor is not easy. You first have to find one that's alive, then one that's healthy enough, and then that one is willing to speak, which is a process that can take half a year with many trials and errors. Mrs. Marthe Cohn is not only a Holocaust survivor, but she's also a World War II veteran and hero. As she will share, she became a spy for the Allied forces and played a very important role in the efforts against the Nazis. Mrs. Cohn is 97, and together with her beloved husband, Dr. Major Cohn, who's also a World War II veteran, still travels around the world extensively to share her extraordinary story. Just to give you an idea of the incredible strength and resilience of Mrs. Cohn, I'm going to share something with you that I'm probably going to get in trouble with her later. As of 3 days ago, we weren't sure whether this event was actually going to happen. At her last lecture, Mrs. Cohn unfortunately fell and injured herself, and she was in considerable pain. Her husband and her children, understandably enough, urged her to cancel this event here at Colorado State University. We, of course, understood, irrespective of our great disappointment that may be. However, Mrs. Cohn insisted on coming, despite her pain, and she's here tonight. Big round of applause. Am I in trouble? No? Okay. May she and her husband be blessed with much health and energy to continue this important work. We're in a world now, this has been repeated by the mayor and by the president and by Alex before me, where anti-Semitism, racism, intolerance has become far too prominent. Fear and worry are dominating globally, nationally, and over here too, unfortunately, even on a local level, we haven't been spared. So it's by no chance that we happen to have not just a remarkable survivor, but Mrs. Cohn here tonight, Her message is extra relevant, timely, and even urgent for our times. I asked Mrs. Cohn, like I asked all the survivors, what motivates you to put such an effort in, to travel so extensively? Not an easy task. Or her words, when she told me she's still going to come, I'm flying to your awful cold territory. Even though she may have the energy of a 20-year-old, at the age of 97, I think she could easily justify retiring and resting and being comfortable. So she told me as follows, and I think this is a message for everybody here, a message for our town, a message for our campus, a message for our country and the world. So the reason why she goes out and takes this energy to speak, she wants people to know that we have lots of debate about what people should do and how we should react. She has a simple message that you can always choose to resist and fight injustice and evil. When she was faced with the Nazi horrors, the worst of mankind, she chose to resist and fight, even at a great risk to her life. She made a stand against evil and darkness. Additionally, she's thankful to the Frenchmen, the good and moral people that helped her, and many others. So we too, she wants us to know and understand, can also choose to make a stand against intolerance and hate, even if you're not part of that demographic or that minority that gets targeted. Being complacent or saying this is not my business, I'm going to keep away from this because it's not your problem, is simply not an option. Take a stand, make a difference, resist and fight the hate and intolerance, because only together can humanity make the world a better place. And finally, Mrs. Cohn sends a message. It's a Jewish fundamental, a Jewish principle. To all those that suffer at the hands of others and those that feel the pain that we have been watching and witnessing in our country, in our town, know this, a message of hope that no matter what you face, you can and you will overcome your challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and join me in welcoming the Honourable Miss Marthe Cohn.
First, I would like to thank Rabbi Gorlick and Mrs. Gorlick for having invited me tonight, and all the staff of the university. I cannot name names, it would take me too long. And I want to thank all the authorities who have come to attend that event, and all of you so numerous who have come to listen to my journey during World War II. I hope you can hear me at the extremities. Okay. We will first show you a DVD. In 2004, Mr. Richard Trenk, the movie director of the Wiesenthal Center, a museum of tolerance, they have two names, in Los Angeles, where we live, came to my home and interviewed me for 5 hours. But be reassured, the DVD will last only 10 minutes. And that DVD was made for a big bash in a hotel in Beverly Hills. I have one more comment to make about that. It was not Mr. Richard Trenk who made the DVD. And after you see the DVD, my comments will explain why I say that. Okay, now here is the DVD.
How does a young girl from a devoutly Orthodox Jewish family end up becoming a spy whose efforts helped to bring an earlier end to the war in Europe in 1945? The answer to that question was one that Marthe Cohn, born Martha Hoffnung, kept to herself for the better part of a half-century. Born in 1920 in the French town of Metz in the Alsace region of France near the German border, Marthe was one of 7 children. The family was quite religious, but at the same time mixed easily with their non-Jewish neighbors. But with war clouds on the horizon in September of 1939, the Hoffnungs and many of their Jewish neighbors decided to move to a safer part of France, away from the German border, to the town of Poitiers, southwest of Paris. However, they were not safe for long. The Nazis invaded France, and with little resistance, the French government capitulated. Immediately, life began to change.
We didn't know how bad it would be. We could not understand that because even if we knew about Kristallnacht, it was in Germany. They did that to the Germans. They couldn't do that to the French people.
For a while, in spite of the various restrictions placed on the Jews, the Hoffnungs were able to go about their daily business. Marthe started nursing school and became engaged to a young medical student. As the war progressed and resistance to the Nazis and their Vichy French collaborators became more widespread, the family began to take more chances. Marthe and her sisters hid Jews who did not have the proper papers, and her fiancé became actively involved in resistance activities. One day, French police arrested her sister Stephanie and then her father. When her father was released shortly thereafter, the family managed to escape using false papers that did not identify them as Jews. There was a plan to help Stephanie escape from the French jail she was being held at, but sadly, it failed.
She was caught in the camp, and then later she was transferred to Drancy near Paris, and then to Pithiviers. And she wrote that they were going to be deported that afternoon of Yom Kippur 42.
Most of the Hoffnung family went to the mountains to join an older brother who was head of the resistance there. Marthe finished her nursing studies in Marseille, occasionally getting the chance to rendezvous with her fiancé Jacques. Then, in the summer of 1943, she went to Paris to work for a month in a hospital, traveling again under her false papers. She met briefly with Jacques. He was on the run for a resistance act that led to the murder of a Nazi collaborator. She begged him to stay in hiding with her.
And I told him, you cannot go back to Poitiers. You have immediately to escape and go south and go to Spain, and I will join you. But he said he has to go back. His family is in Poitiers. His brother is there. He will tell them goodbye and live with his brother and his friends as soon as they can. And he left after his examination. He left, and he promised me to write me every day. And 3 letters arrived, and the 4th one never came.
She soon learned that Jacques had been arrested along with his brother and several friends. He was tried and then executed for his resistance activities. Broken-hearted, Marthe returned to Marseille, graduated from her nursing studies, and then moved back to Paris to work for a registry. She remained there until the Allies liberated France.
When we heard on the radio that the troops were entering Paris, all the church bells started ringing, and we opened our windows and we all sang the Marseillaise. The whole city was singing the Marseillaise.
Almost immediately after the liberation, Marthe enlisted in the French army, where initially she worked as a social worker in the Alsace region of the country, close to her hometown of Metz. When her commanding officer learned that Marthe spoke fluent German, he recruited her to join Army intelligence.
I was introduced to Colonel Bouvet. He told me he needs me to interrogate people, to know what's going on, to know how the strategy of the German, if they are retreating or not retreating, and how many people are there, all this military information.
After procuring information from Nazi POWs, Marthe was ready for her spy mission. It involved crossing the border from Switzerland into Germany to see how entrenched the Nazis still were. She would then have to pass that intelligence on to the Allies. It took more than 13 tries, but Martha made it over the border into Germany. Her cover was that she was a German nurse trying to find out what happened to her Nazi fiancé. One day, she came upon a group of German soldiers who had retreated from the Allies.
And we were walking, and among us was a non-commissioned officer who was an SS, and he was raving about the Jews, how much he had killed Poles and Jews and all that. And he loved, and he smelled Jews a mile away. You know, that's always what they say. He was going back to the Siegfried line. He had been wounded, and he came back from the hospital. And as we walked, he fainted. So I was a good German nurse. I took care of him.
From this SS soldier, Martha was able to obtain important information about exactly what was going on at the Nazi front lines. Making her way back to the Swiss border, she was able to transmit her report with the help of a Swiss farming family. Martha then crossed the border again and made her way back into Germany to see if there was anything else she could uncover.
I walked to the Siegfried line to see what's going on. And when I arrived at the Siegfried line, they were all gone. The last stragglers were leaving. And they told me that the Siegfried line is empty. Do you realize what an important information that was?
The information Martha uncovered helped to shorten the Allied effort to defeat the Nazis and saved untold numbers of lives. For the better part of a half-century, Martha did not talk of her experiences, even with her family. But in the mid-1990s, while visiting in France, she made a request for her French Army records. When officials at the French archives saw her file of commendations and achievements, the wheels were put into motion for her to be awarded the Médaille Militaire, one of France's highest military honors, and the same medal awarded to Sir Winston Churchill by the French government. Why was she so quiet about her exploits over the years?
It was not modesty, but I thought that nobody would believe me. You know, usually a spy is a very tall, good-looking woman, and I didn't feel I was that type of person at all. I was a very unlikely spy. Thank you. Thank you. I have some comments to make about the DVD. Like usually, and if there are media people here, I do not intend to offend anybody. But any time I am interviewed by the media, they never render things the way I tell them. And that has nothing to do with fake news. So one of the mistakes, they pretend that I was born in Alsace. To my knowledge, my home city of Metz, M-E-T-Z, is in Lorraine and not in Alsace. Alsace-Lorraine are two provinces. They are very different provinces. One of the main things, the Alsatians speak a German dialect, which is called Alsatian. And the Lorraine speak or French or German, but they don't speak any dialects. They speak Hochdeutsch, the real German. So I was never born in Alsace. I like the Alsatians and I get along with them very well, but I was not born there. There is a much more important mistake in the DVD. My sister Stephanie was never arrested by the French police. In my book, I wrote that she was arrested by the Gestapo. The Gestapo was a German police unit which served the German government and the German army. And when they come to your house to arrest somebody, they don't tell you to what police unit they belong. So we thought it was the Gestapo. But years later, I did some research for Yad Vashem, the museum in Jerusalem, and I discovered that my sister had been arrested by the SIPO, S-I-P-O, just initials of a very long German word. If you know German, you know that the German like to put one word next to the other and make a long word. So the SIPO was created by a decree signed by Hitler in March 1942. My sister was arrested June 17, 1942. So to show you the efficacious of the German army, the decree signed in March 1942, and the SIPO is already in all occupied countries of Europe by the German army and ready to arrest people. And they probably arrested people before they arrested my sister. My sister was arrested for resistance acts. She and I, we had saved hundreds of people who rang our bell. Every day people rang our bell. We did not know from where they were coming. We didn't know who they were, but they needed help. I'm sorry. So we sent them to a farmer, Mr. Noel de Goux, who had a farm which was partially in occupied France and partially in non-occupied France. Poitiers, where we were refugees, as you saw in the DVD, was in occupied France. And these people needed to get out of occupied France. The Jews, of course, but also American and English pilots who had been shot down over occupied France and needed to get out of there as fast as possible because they didn't speak a word of French, and they would have been very fast noticed by the German, arrested, and God knows what would have happened to them. And Mr. de Goux saved thousands of people in this farm, which I told you was partially in occupied France and partially in non-occupied France. So once on his property, it was very easy to go from one sector to the other. And he was very clever. The Germans had suspicions that he helped people, but they had never found any evidence because he knew how to arrange things. But my sister wrote a letter to Mr. de Goux, and she made a huge mistake. She signed the letter with a real name, which we never did. Why she did that, we don't know. It was too late. It was no use to discuss the issue with her. So she was taken to the offices of the SIPO. I have to tell you one more thing. The SIPO had been created by Hitler for two purposes. For the Jewish question, of course, but also for the resistance. Because in 1942, the resistance in France had become better organized and more structured and more efficacious. Until then, the French followed Maréchal Pétain, who had taken the government of Vichy. Vichy is just a resort town, and that's where the government was, and that's why the government is called the Vichy government. And Pétain had been a marshal during World War I, and he was very well known for the battles of Verdun. And like you in America, loved Eisenhower, who commanded the American army during World War II. The French loved Pétain because of what he had done in Verdun and followed him. But in 1942, the French had started to understand that Pétain was, who had taken the government illegally, because we were a democracy. He was never elected. He just took the government because when the Germans invaded France, it was so chaotic that he just took the government without being elected. And Pétain followed the Germans and became a collaborator, 100% collaborator with the German army and the German government. And after the armistice, after we won the war again against the Germans, Pétain went in front of a tribunal and he was condemned to prison. So he was an old man. He died in prison. He was never liberated because he had been a traitor to France. So I want to give you a little idea what was going on in France at that time. So I come back to my sister. She was taken to the offices of the Zippo and questioned. She refused to give any information about Noël de Gaulle because any information would have been a denunciation. So the Zippo came back to the house several hours later and arrested my father to put pressure on my sister to give them information. But even in the presence of my father, Stephanie refused to give any information. So she was kept. My father was released because in June 1942, the Germans in Poitiers had not yet started to arrest French Jews. They had arrested only foreign Jews. You know, and right now it's a very important issue worldwide. When economic or political questions arise, so foreigners are always the first target. And that was then, and it is now. So the foreign Jews were all in a camp in the fringes of the city of Poitiers. The camp was called the Camp of the Rout of Limoges. Limoges is a city south of Poitiers. The camp is cited in Google. You can find that in Google if you are interested. So in that camp were entire families of foreign Jews with their children, and they had never received any medical care since they were arrested. So I go back to my sister. My husband is my prompter, and he puts me back on track when I'm off track, which happens often. And so my sister was in prison for 1 month. She celebrated her 21st birthday in prison on July 10th, 1942. And after that month, she was transferred to the camp where she was the only French Jew. And she was a medical student, and she started to give medical care to the children in the camp. She had very poor tools, but it was better than nothing. So the family, my family had decided to help her escape. And we had found two French guardians in the camp which accepted to help her escape. But she refused to escape because she felt that what she was doing for the children was too important. I have letters in my home from a person of the prefecture of Poitiers who herself, she was a woman, told my sister that she wants to help her escape. And to that woman, she told the same thing, that she did not want to escape because she felt her work with the children was too important. So in prison, we could not visit her, but in the camp, one person of the family could go once a week. So 1 week, I went to see her, and I reminded her that her mother needed her as much as the children. And she answered me, "Don't you realize that if I escape, you are all going to be arrested?" I had never thought about that. So on my way back from the camp to the home, it was a very long walk. I decided that all members of my family still in Poitiers, we would escape, cross the border between occupied and non-occupied France so that she can escape too. We were successful. I cannot give you details. We would be here until tomorrow. You have to read my book if you want to know the details. But we were successful, and our story of crossing the border and the help we got to cross that border is one of the most beautiful human story you can imagine. So we were successful, but my sister was never able to escape. Once she accepted to escape, and she was later, after our departure, she was transferred to Drancy, an atrocious camp near Paris, and then to Pithiviers, another atrocious camp, from where she was deported on September 21st, 1942, the day of Yom Kippur, which is the highest Jewish holiday of the year, like Christmas for Christians. So in her last letter, she could not communicate with us because there was no postal communication between occupied France and non-occupied France at that time. So she wrote to a friend in Poitiers, and in the postscriptum she added, "At the last rumors, we are leaving for Metz to work, so no need to dramatize." These words were the last words she ever wrote, because years later, we found out that she had been sent to Auschwitz and she never came back. I always like to honor my sister before I tell my own stories. But I have another subject which is very dear to my heart that I want to elaborate upon before coming to my own story. 75% of Jews survived in France. There is only one, and that's a historical fact which is absolutely accepted. The first reference I found was at the Washington, D.C. Shoah the Holocaust Museum, where on a huge panel is written 75% of Jews survived in France. And you can check the internet and you will find that it's absolutely an accepted historical fact. And if 75% of French Jews in France survived, it's because we got so much help from non-Jews who helped us at the risk of their life and of every member of their family. I will give you an example. Several weeks before my sister was arrested, I met in the main street of Poitiers Mr. Charpentier, with whom I had worked in the French City Hall of Poitiers. Mr. Charpentier stopped me, took me to a very quiet space in the street, and told me, I am now in measure to provide you with identity cards without the stem Jew. And I answered him, Mr. Charpentier, you cannot do that. You risk your life, that of your wife and little boy. I had seen pictures when we worked together. And he answered me, if I didn't help you, I could not live with myself. I asked him how much it would cost to make all these identity cards without the stem Jew. And he started crying. I was 22 years old. I had never made a man cry yet, so I was extremely embarrassed. And Mr. Charpentier told me, I do not want any money. I want to save you. And he provided me with his identity cards without the stem Jew. And I hid them without telling anybody, not even my parents, because I had already understood that less people are involved, safer it was. So, but walking back that day from the camp to the house, I could decide that we could leave because we had identity cards without the stem Jew. With the stem Jew, we could not go to any public space. We could not go to a train station, to a post office, to a public park, to swim in the river of the city. We could not go to any store. We couldn't go to a food store until 4:30 in the afternoon. And we had 1 hour window to do all our shopping. At that time, there were no supermarkets. There were mom and pop shops. And every shop was selling its specialty. And so you had to go in many shops. All the owners of the shops told us, do not worry, come back at 4:30. We know exactly what your family needs and what you normally buy. We will prepare it for you and you can leave immediately. And as long as we lived in Poitiers, we never were deprived of anything. And that was at the risk of their life and of every member of their family, but they did it. So that's just one of the examples. In my books, there are many more. So
you left for Marseille.
yeah, so we were now in Marseille. And in Marseille, I continued my studies of nursing I had started in Poitiers. It was forbidden to Jews to be in schools. But in Poitiers and in Marseille, knowing that I was a Jew, they accepted me. Not always very willingly, but they accepted me. I talk about Marseille. In Poitiers, there was no problem whatsoever. The director of the hospital in Poitiers told me the first day I was wearing the yellow star with the word Jew inscribed in it. He told me, I do not want you to wear that in my hospital. So every day, when the Gestapo, or perhaps the Zippo, we didn't know the difference then, came to arrest people in the hospital, they took them out in nightgowns, opening the back without clothes, and deported them. When they came to arrest these people, because we had people from the camp who were sick in the hospital, the nuns would hide me in a small office because they knew that all the Germans had noticed there were not so many Jews, and we were wearing the yellow star on the left side of our heart. So they had noticed all of us, and the nuns knew that if the Germans see me without the star, they would arrest me immediately. So they hid me in a small office, and that was at the risk of their life. So to show you how much help we had. So in Marseille, I finished my studies of nursing in 1943, and I decided to go back to Paris. I could do it because I had the forged card, identity card of Mr. Charpentier without the stem Jew. So in Paris, I worked for an agency. I could not work for a hospital which would have asked me too many questions, but an agency didn't ask me any questions, and I was able to make a living taking care of people, sick people in their home. And at that time, thousands and thousands of Jews all over occupied Europe died of starvation because they had no right to make a living and they had no savings to buy food. So after after the liberation of Paris, I decided to join the French army. I had decided that even before. So I tried to join the army. It was extremely difficult because thousands of people want to join the army. I was in a column for several days, and when I reached a person to talk to after several days, it was a woman, and she asked to see my identity card. I presented that forged by Mr. Charpentier. She looked at it and immediately told me, but that's a forged card. The army cannot accept it. She must have worked in the underground or resistance in forged papers to notice that so fast, because nobody had ever shown any doubt about the validity of that card until then. So she asked me for my birth certificate. Paris was liberated in August 1944, but my home city of Metz was liberated only in November 1944. So you can understand that even if I had asked for my birth certificate, the Germans would never have sent it to me. So I couldn't get it. Third point, I had to prove, like all people who went to join the army, that I had not collaborated with the German army. How do you prove something you haven't done? It's impossible. So I did not join the army until November 1944. After Poitiers was liberated, I took the first train functioning between Paris and Poitiers, and I went to visit the mother of my fiancé you saw in the DVD. She was all alone and very ill. Her two boys, my fiancé Jacques, was a medical student, and his younger brother Marc, who was a law student, had been both executed by the German with two other friends on October 6, 1943, at Mont Valérien, the worst prison in Paris. And her husband, who was a resistant too, had been arrested and was in the Buchenwald concentration camp. So she was extremely sick. I took her to Paris to live with my sister and I, and we gave her the medical care she so badly needed. Once she was better, she and I went to the cemetery where her two sons were buried by the Germans. There was a big celebration where President de Gaulle was supposed to talk to the parents of the of the people who had been executed and buried there. It was the cemetery of Ivry, a suburb of Paris. President de Gaulle arrived, he saluted and left. He didn't talk to anybody. De Gaulle was not a very social person, but he was a great general. So the army was present, and the army asked Mrs. Delaunay, the mother of my fiancé, what they can do to help her. And she told them, Miss Hoffnung was the fiancée of my oldest son, and she would like to join the army. She has not the right documents to do that. Can you help her? In a few days, everything was done. And I was called by the army and told that I was now assigned to the 151 Regiment of Infantry, which was at the front. And the front was now in Alsace. You remember where I was not born. So I was told to go to a certain place in Paris where I would find a bus to take me to the front. I went there and I went on the bus and we left Paris. But the bus needed repair constantly and it took us a long time to arrive at the front. But we had another important problem. We had not enough gasoline. The first French army, which was the free French army of President de Gaulle, which was commanded by Maréchal de Lattre de Tassigny, came from North Africa, where they had fought in Tunisia, in Eritrea, in Italy, in Corsica, and now they were fighting in France. And that first French army was quasi-independent strategically, but depended completely upon all her resources on the third and sixth American armies, which were in Alsace with them. But the Americans between Paris and Alsace did not know anything about that agreement. Then when two of our officers, and they always took me along because they thought it would help, it didn't help at all, demanded gasoline in the offices of the American army, because we had not enough gasoline to go to the front. The French government had been very rich before 1939, but in 1944 it was completely bankrupted because the Germans had stolen everything we had when they occupied France. So
To ask for gasoline.
yeah, so when we asked for gasoline, when our officers asked for gasoline, the Americans answered, the French army, no way are we going to give you gasoline. So we had only one option, to go to the front. We stole the gasoline from non-attended jeeps stopped on the road. And I was the only girl, so I was the lookout. I was an accomplice. So we finally reached the front very late at night. And I was the only newcomer because all the others in the bus were officers, non-commissioned officers, and soldiers who had gone on furlough to Paris and returned to the front. So, being the only newcomer, I was immediately debriefed, that means interviewed, by an officer of intelligence. In every regiment of every army, you have at least one officer of intelligence. And that captain asked me immediately what I had done during the resistance. I told him that with my sister, who was now deported and we had no news yet, we had saved thousands of people. And
after you try to join the resistance.
yeah, and after she was deported, I did things on my own, but I was never able to join a group of resistance. Several times I was interviewed by chief of the resistance in the attics of big buildings in Marseille and Paris, because it was ultra secret. And every time the chiefs of the resistance looked at me, as you have seen, I am not very tall, and that's an understatement. But I was taller than I am now. I was 4'11". I was very thin. I was very blonde with blue eyes and a light skin. And they looked at me and felt that I had absolutely no substance. They took me for a bimbo, and they refused me. And I told that the captain, and he said to me, that's a lot of hogwash. I'm sorry, Rabbi, to say such a word. But that's what he said. But you should have gone in the streets and killed a German. And I told him, I'm a nurse. I take care of people. I don't kill anybody, not even Germans I hate. Then he said to me, you see, you don't fit in the army. And he too wanted to send me back to my mother. I said, no, I had enough trouble coming. The headquarters in Paris sent me. I am going to stay. So furious, he told me, as a registered nurse, you should be an officer. but because you were such a coward during the resistance, I make you sergeant. And I just shrugged my shoulders because I couldn't care less what grade he was giving me. So more furious by my attitude, he told me, I have enough nurses. I do not need any nurses. You are going to be a social worker. All my training was in nursing. I had not the smallest idea what social work entailed. But in the army, and that counts for all armies in the world, if they tell you you're a social worker, that's what you are. So I left the office and went to the town where we were headquartered, and I had a room like all people who were not at the front, all troops who were not at the front had a room in the town. And I slept all night. The next morning I got up and put on the American uniform I was given. I told you all our resources came from the 3rd and 6th American Army, which was with us in Alsace. So I put on that uniform, which was much too big for me, but it was warm, and that was very important because the winter of 1944, 1945 was exceptionally cold, and we were near the Vosges Mountains where it was colder. So I did not get any orders what to do as a social worker. I was completely ignored. So I decided to visit our troops at the front. I inquired, and I left this little town in a certain direction, crossed a small forest, and on the other side of the forest there was a canal. Our troops were on the western side of the canal. The Germans had retreated 2-3 days earlier on the eastern side of the canal, which was narrow like most man-made canals. And I entered the foxholes of our troop. They were very surprised because they had never seen a social worker in the foxholes. And I asked them what they needed. They demanded mostly underwear, hats, socks, scarves, blankets, food, reading and writing material. I would go back to the village, and the Alsatians were extremely generous and gave me a lot of things for our troops. And I did that for several weeks. And then one day, crossing the square of the village at lunchtime, I met the colonel of the regiment. In 1943, we all knew that the resistance had killed the first German in France, in the metro station Barbès-Rochechouart in Paris, the metro station. There is now a metro station bearing the name of the colonel of the 151 Regiment of Infantry. It was Pierre Fabien. Pierre Fabien had put together a huge group, big enough to be a regiment, and fought extremely hard against the Germans in Paris and in the Paris region. And to reward him and the group, President de Gaulle and Maréchal de Lattre-Tassigny, commanding the First French Army, decided to reward that group by incorporating them as a regiment in the mainstream army where I met them. And Colonel Fabien stopped me and asked me to answer his phone during his lunch break. So I went with him to his office. He showed me around, and leaving, he was only 26 years old. He had never been in the army before, but he was kept as colonel of the regiment. Leaving, he was very good looking, which doesn't hurt anything, and he was very courteous. And he said to me, I am sorry, I have nothing to read for you. There are only German books here. And I answered, that's quite all right. I read German fluently. So very interested, he walked back towards me and asked me if I spoke German. And I told him yes, as well as French. Then he explained to me that in the German army, all males from the age of 12 to old age were in uniform in the German army. So if any men in civilian clothes were walking the streets of Germany, he would be immediately noticed and arrested. That's why they needed women to do that work. And he asked me if I accepted to be transferred to the intelligence service of the First French Army. I accepted. He left. I sat on a chair and wondered in what predicament I had put myself, but it was too late. 2-3 days later, 2 officers of the intelligence service came to pick me up and took me to Mulhouse, another city in Alsace. And later we were in Colmar, another city in Alsace, where I underwent an extremely intensive training for what I was going to do. When the training was terminated, they asked me to devise my own alibi, because that would stick better than an alibi given to me. So I devised my alibi and presented it. It was accepted, and after that, I was assigned to the Commandos of Africa. In the DVD, you heard the name of Colonel Bouvet. He was commanding the Commandos of Africa, which, like all regiments of North Africa, had fought in Tunisia, Eritrea, Italy, Corsica, and now in France. And Colonel Bouvet asked me first to interrogate officers of the prisoners of German prisoners of war to learn the plan of retreat of the German from Alsace to Germany. We were now in January 1945. The Germans had counterattacked in the winter of 1944 in Belgium and had lost the counterattack just before Christmas 1944. It was a very powerful counterattack. And now, in January 1945, they were counterattacking again, coming from Germany through Strasbourg. And at that time, all the Allied armies, me included, we had to retreat quite a bit west in France, in Alsace. And that counterattack lasted several weeks. So it was extremely important, Colonel Bouvet told me, for the Allied armies to know the plan of retreat of the Germans from Alsace to Germany. Every army has a plan of retreat as well, a plan of attack, because you never know how things will turn out. So I interrogated generals and colonels. The subaltern would have known nothing about the plan of retreat. And I was able to get very important information about the plan of retreat. And I can boast about it because in one of the medals on that table, the citation says that I provided Colonel Bouvet with extremely precise and later confirmed information about the retreat of the Germans from Alsace to Germany. That was my first achievement in the army. After that, Colonel Bouvet asked me to cross the front in Alsace. And 13 times I tried to cross the front in Alsace, and I was not successful. There were many reasons for it. One of them, during the war, things change very fast. Everything is very fluid. And I was told to go to a certain place where I would find a certain thing. But when I arrived at that place, I couldn't find anything, so I couldn't proceed. And that happened several times. Another reason, we had medical,
Personnel who
we had military guides who knew the region very well and explained to me everything I would find from A to B on the ground and how to proceed on the ground. But they are humans and they make mistakes. I will give you an example. One night, very late, I was always taken very late at night. I was taken by ship by two officers of the intelligence service. And the ship stopped near a huge field covered with snow. We got out of the ship, and the two officers told me that I had to cross that huge field covered with snow and find a small town northwest of that field where I will meet a group of German soldiers who are going to move to retreat somewhere somewhere east, still in Alsace, not yet in Germany. And to meet them, to mix with them, go with them, and send back as much information I could. I had only a small suitcase with clothes, a change of clothes, and I had taken all the labels off so nobody could tell they came from France. But I had no card, I had no arm, I had no map, I had no weapon. I said no arm. I had no,
nothing written.
no, the thing to show.
Compass.
I had no compass. I had nothing written. Everything I needed to know was in my memory. And
Had no flashlight.
I had not even a flashlight. So I left and I crossed that huge field. And suddenly I heard a huge crack. And I felt myself submerged in the ice-cold water of a canal. The military guide had only forgotten to tell me there was a canal in that field. So I popped up and I tried to grasp the edge of the canal to get out, but everything was so frozen that it was extremely difficult to get out, because now I was much heavier. I was drenched in that ice-cold water from head to toe. And it took me a very, very long time. You have to understand that I had no way of calling for help. I had to do it on my own. So I finally managed to get out of the canal, and I walked all night looking for the town that I never found. And I never caught a cold, to show you how much stress can help you. And at daybreak, I noticed that my footprint showed that I had walked in circles all night. And years later, I read in a magazine that if you have no compass and no other mark, you are going by a dark night to walk in circles. And that explained to me why I had done that very weird thing I had never understood. After that, the captain who directed our small group of intelligence decided that I was going into Germany through Switzerland. Switzerland was neutral, but the Germans had helped, the Swiss had helped the Germans as long as they were successful. Now we were successful, they were helping us. That's neutrality. So I was taken by one of our officers to Basel, where I met again, I had met him before, Colonel Reinhardt is a fictitious name. And Colonel Reinhardt was the chief of intelligence of the Swiss customs in Basel. And he accepted that I crossed from Switzerland into Germany. He called an agent, Mr. Lemaire, another fictitious name, to take me to the border between Switzerland and Germany. Mr. Lemaire took me by car to Schaffhausen, which is very close to the city of Singen, the first city I was supposed to go into Germany. So we drove to a certain place where Mr. Lemaire stopped the car. We got out of the car and crossed a small forest. On the other side of the forest, Mr. Lemaire showed me a huge field. There are lots of fields in my story. And this one was bordered on the northern edge by a small country road. The forest and the field were Switzerland, but the country road was Germany. And there was along the width of that field no barrier whatsoever between the field and the road. But the road was under the surveillance of two German sentinels, heavily armed, which came, one from the eastern edge of the field, walked to the center of the width of the field. The other sentinel came from the west, met him, they talked 2-3 seconds, turned their back, and walked to the edge of the field. And they were doing that constantly without stopping. And Mr. Lemaire told me toward evening, but still in daytime, when I tell you, you will crawl along the field and hide behind the bushes near the road and near the center of the width of the field. And when the two sentinels come and separate again, you crawl along the field and hide behind the bushes. And when they come back again and turn their back and separate and turn their back to you again, you walk on the road, you walk towards the east, towards the right, and you will meet the sentinel who will come back towards you. Very well. We stayed, Mr. Le Maire and I, in that forest all afternoon. He was a middle-aged man. I was 24 years old. He was talking about his wife and children and a lot of other things. But in the afternoon, with a very strange smile, he said to me, "You may be killed tonight, so why don't we have a good time now?" But that was not on my agenda. So after that, we talked about other things, and towards evening, but it was still daylight, he told me, "Now is the time." I took my little suitcase, and now I had two new things in my suitcase. I had my clothes without labels, like I told you before. I had again no arm, no compass, no map, nothing in writing. But I had now given the day before vouchers for everything I needed in Germany, because everything was on vouchers. I had vouchers for hotels, for restaurants, for food, for buses, for trains, for whatever I needed in Germany. And I had a lot of German money hidden in my suitcase. But nobody in my service was able to explain to me how to use the vouchers, because we did not know much of what was going on in Germany. That's why I was sent to Germany for two purposes: for military information, of course, but also information on how the civilians were reacting to the war and behaving. We did not know. So I had these things in my suitcase. And when Mr. Le Maire in the evening told me to go, I left with my little suitcase and I arrived behind the bushes without any problem. But once behind the bushes, seeing the sentinel come and go, I became so terrified that I was paralyzed by fear. And I was also extremely incapable of thinking straight. When Mr. Le Maire told me that I would have to crawl along the field in the early afternoon, I had put on white knee-high socks to protect my silk socks that were very expensive. And at the time, women wear silk socks, not nylon yet. So, but once behind the bushes, I was so irrational that I thought that the entire German army could see my white socks. And I became so terrified that I was completely paralyzed by fear. And it took me a very long time. But suddenly, something blinked in my brain, and I remembered something, and that made me get up, take my little suitcase, walk on the road, meet the German soldier who came back from the eastern edge of the width of the field. I raised my right arm, Heil Hitler, and he asked to see my identity card. I showed it. I was now called Martha Ulrich. That was part of my alibi. And I wondered if he too would recognize that that card was forged by my intelligence service. But he gave it back to me without questioning. I was now in Germany. I have to ask Rabbi and all the assistants, are you willing to listen 15 more minutes so that I end my story? Are you with me? Okay. Okay. So you have seen in the DVD that I was in Freiburg. My sector was from the Swiss border to Freiburg, a huge sector. And I walked from Freiburg to the Swiss border 3 times, back and forth. So in Freiburg, as I didn't know what the Germans were doing, I was watching, and I discovered that in daytime, no transportation was working because of the American bombardments. The transportation was working only at night. Trains, buses,
military cars.
German army cars, nothing was functioning in daytime, buses, nothing. And if the Germans want to go somewhere, they had to walk. And they always walked in groups because the Germans don't like to do things individually. They like to be in groups. And I joined one group going in the direction I wanted to go. In that group was an SS who came back from the Russian front. He was walking next to me. He just happened that way. And he didn't stop talking. He told us immediately that he had been wounded on the Russian front and was now coming from the hospital, and he was now assigned to the Siegfried line in the direction we were walking. And during the time we were walking, he told us all the atrocities the SS and the Wehrmacht had committed on the Eastern Front. They had committed atrocities on the Western Front, but it was nothing compared to what had been done on the Western Front. We didn't know anything about it because the American and English government kept us in the dark for the reasons we never understood. So I heard all these atrocities. I was walking next to me, and at one point he said that he smells a Jew a mile away, but that morning his smell was pretty bad. So as we walked quite fast, and it was a little warm, he suddenly fainted. I was a nurse, I took care of him. When he regained consciousness, he was so grateful that I had taken care of him that he invited me to visit him at the Siegfried line, and he gave me his phone number. For 3 weeks, I had other things to do, but 3 weeks later, I came back to Freiburg, and I heard on the German radio that the Allied armies were very close and were going to invade Freiburg very soon. So I felt that's the time to go to see my friend, the SS. And I walked to the Siegfried line, which was 10 kilometers. And when I arrived at the Siegfried line, I discovered that the Siegfried Line had been completely evacuated. The last stragglers were leaving, and they told me, they are all gone. Your friend, I had his phone number, so they thought it was my boyfriend. Your friend, everybody is gone. We are the last one to leave. I interrogated, I talked to several stragglers who were walking independently, and they confirmed that the Siegfried Line had been completely evacuated. So understanding the importance of that information, that meant that our Allied armies had not to fight the Siegfried Line, which was an atrocious project, but could much faster invade the south of Germany and terminate the war. So I walked back to Freiburg as fast as I could. And when I arrived in Freiburg, the city was completely deserted. All the Germans had heard on the German radio that the city was going to be invaded by foreign army, which is extremely frightening. I was in Poitiers when the Germans invaded, and I can tell you that it's extremely frightening. So I was all alone in the center of Freiburg. I went to the main artery and waited, and the first tank arrived and rode towards me. How was I going to make the people on that tank understand that I was a friend and not an enemy? I had absolutely no document, nothing to prove who I was. So I went in the middle of the avenue, and I raised my right arm. I cannot raise any either of what. I raised my right arm as high as I could and made the V sign, the victory sign of Winston Churchill. At that time, everybody in Europe and the Allied armies knew too that Winston Churchill was very seldom seen on photography, not doing the V sign, the victory sign. So I raised my arm as high as I could, making the V sign, and I waited. And because I'm extremely, extremely lucky, the tank did not kill me, but stopped. I asked for the officer in charge to come down to talk to me. I was quite assertive, I must say. And he came down, and I told him that I had extremely important information to take me immediately to headquarters. He took me, and luckily again for me, it was the French army which invaded Freiburg. You can all Google it and check that I tell you the truth. And that was so lucky for me, because if an English-speaking army had invaded Freiburg, I don't know how I could have communicated with them, because I didn't speak English yet. So with a French army, there was no problem of communication. That officer took me immediately on the tank and drove me to the headquarters in Freiburg, because as soon an army invades a city, they have a headquarters. And I met Commander Petit of the 2nd Zouave, another regiment of the 1st French Army. And Commander Petit asked me immediately.
Who tells me it's not a trap?
Yeah, he told me immediately, who says that's the truth? It may be a trap. So I took a piece of paper and a pen, and I wrote a phone number, because we had the same technology as the American Army, we could communicate by telephone to any service on the field. So he called my service, who reassured him that he could trust me, and they were happy to learn that I was still alive, because you remember I had no radio, so I could not communicate very often with them. So Commodore Petit sent a patrol to the Siegfried Line to verify my information. They came back several hours later saying that's true. The Siegfried Line is completely evacuated in that region. So I was a very important VIP that night at the French headquarters in Freiburg. I was invited for dinner, I was given a room, and the next morning at breakfast, Commodore Petit asked me if I wanted to rejoin my service, my intelligence service. I told him no, my mission terminates the day of the armistice. I have to cross the front today south of Freiburg. But I asked him for very important help. I asked him for a bicycle because I was tired of walking. So he gave me a bicycle, and riding down from a big summit, the huge mountains in the south of Freiburg, I saw stopped along the road a group of German military ambulances. When you belong to the intelligence service and you see something unusual, you always stop to inquire. So I stopped and started talking to them. And the colonel of the group, who directed the group, who was also a physician, told me that night they would go into Switzerland, which was not very far, and from there to Austria, to become prisoners of war. And then they asked me from where I was coming, and I told them that the same morning I had escaped from Freiburg because I was afraid by the French army, which had Moroccan, Algerian, Tunisian, and black soldiers. You have to remember that at that time, we still had colonies in North Africa and Africa. So, and we had these troops in our army. That was the truth. But if you remember how racist the Germans were at that time, you can understand the effect of what I was telling them had on them. I was now a model of a German patriot, and I was complaining too that our German army was not defending us anymore as much as they should. So after a while, the colonel said to me, "Don't be so desperate. The war is not ended." And he told me exactly where the remnant of the German army was hidden in ambush in the Black Forest. And that information, which was a major information, I wrote without coding, because I could not take the time to code, which is a very long process. I wrote in French all that information, and I put that letter in my left pocket with my hand on it for protection, big protection. And I went myself into Switzerland because Colonel Reinhardt had told me in Basel, if ever you are in trouble, go into Switzerland and talk to the Swiss customer, but tell him that you are Swiss agent, not French, which I did. And the Swiss customer sent my letter to Colonel Reinhard, who read it because it was in French, it was not in code. He wanted to know what was going on, and then he gave it to my service. And that's why I got all these medals. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You have to remember to look at each of you. Thank you. I love questions. I love questions. Please ask questions. Do you have any questions?
Hello, everybody. Okay, so as everyone's leaving, I would just like to reiterate the fact that outside we will be selling Marthe Cohn's book.
Yes.
It's for pre-order, and you can get it signed by her. I would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It was a really emotional evening. We learned a lot, and I would like to thank Holocaust Awareness Week Board. I would like to thank all the Jewish organizations. I would like to thank ASCSU, the mayor of Fort Collins, the city of Fort Collins, the staff of CSU. This wouldn't be possible without all of you guys. That said, if you have any questions, feel free to email survivorcsu@gmail.com. And I got a few questions during the presentation, so I guess I'll just start answering those right away. Okay, sorry. So our first question comes from Annie O'Neill, and she asks Marthe, did you ever visit a concentration camp?
Did you ever visit a concentration camp?
Yes, in 2005, I went to Poland to visit Auschwitz, and I visited Auschwitz. Until then, I thought that I could never visit any concentration camp. When I was in Germany, in the south of Germany, there were no concentration camps, so I never saw one. And I never saw, during that time, any concentration camp when I was in Germany. But after the armistice, we moved to the northern region of the Rhine, and there I met survivors. I did not know who they were. I was involved for Commodore Petit to do economic recovery. That means I went to German organization and tried to find what had been stolen from France or from other occupied countries. So I was in a jeep with the driver, and I saw these strange people in pajamas and little round hats. The first time I saw them, we didn't stop. But the next town, I saw another group, so I asked the driver to stop. And I started talking to them. And when they told me what had happened, I thought they were all coming from a psychiatric hospital. I could not believe. It was inconceivable that a civilized country like Germany had done such things, and I couldn't believe it. But when so many told me the same story, I started to understand that that was the truth, and I understood what had been going on. And it was the first time that I thought that my sister may have died. Until then, I thought she had been working in Germany. I didn't think that she would have a marvelous life, but I didn't think that the Germans could behave the way they did.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question comes from Autumn Young, and this was actually one that I was really curious about too. How did you meet your husband, Major?
How did you meet your husband?
I met my husband in 1953 in Switzerland, in Geneva. I was a student getting my degree in nursing in Switzerland, and my husband was a student too. But I met him through his roommate, who was French.
Okay, next question. Okay, so this question comes from Yvonne Alexander, and she asks, how do you find the strength to do something so courageous, and why did you risk your life in such a high-stakes situation?
Why did you risk your life to do such a dangerous thing?
What?
Why did you risk your life to do what you did?
You mean in Germany?
Yes.
It was absolutely normal at that time. You have to know the circumstances. And in these circumstances, it was absolutely normal. So many people who were not Jewish had risked their life for us. Wasn't that normal that all Jews fight too? And anyway, even if we would not have been helped, it was normal for Jews to fight. Since I was a very small child, perhaps 4 years old, my oldest brother, who was really very important in our life, told us it's better to die fighting than to be a slave. And that was something which impressed me very much.
All right, and then we have a few questions from a few different people asking, what happened to the rest of your family during your time?
What happened to the rest of your family during the war?
Okay, all my family was extremely active in the resistance, all of them. And after the war,
They all survived.
well,
They all survived.
and my oldest brother was the chief of the resistance in the center of France in the mountains, and he made all my family calm. They all lived together, and he protected them. And when things got bad, they went even higher in the mountains. But the Germans came everywhere anyway. But they all survived because they were all active in the resistance. And my parents never told us not to do the resistance we were doing. But they didn't know that I was in intelligence service in the army. That they didn't know until I came back.
All right, I think we're gonna do 3 more questions. Our next one is, were there many women in the French army at that time? And as a woman, how were you treated?
Were there many other women in the French army at that time, and how were women treated?
I don't know how they were treated because when you are in intelligence, you are completely isolated in the army. Because if you are caught, you are going to give names and descriptions of the person, so you never meet anybody else who is in intelligence in the army. I know the English did it differently, but the French army did it that way. So I never knew, and I don't know how the other, I know only that there was a big respect for us in the army, for what we were doing. The, how do you call the people the ambulance drivers were all women, and they were doing a marvelous job. They were on the front every day, several times, sometimes all day and all night, taking wounded and bringing them back to our hospitals, as well in France as later in Vietnam. because I was later in Vietnam as a nurse for the French army.
So the women were well treated.
But we were all very much respected. I don't know, some girls didn't behave as well as others, but that's a problem.
Okay, so another question that I and a lot of people in the audience seem to be curious about is when and why did you come to America?
When and why did you come to America? When and why did you?
I came to America in June 1956 because my future husband, we were not married yet, imported me.
I would also just like to take this time to mention that these two have been married for over 60 years.
C'est la fin. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Martha and Major, if you would like to chime in on this too, feel free. Last question. What would you like us to take away from what you've said today?
What message would you like them to take away?
What?
What message
Yeah.
would you like them to take?
I hate to give messages to adults. They should have their own message. But to children, to young students, I say, be engaged and do not accept any order your conscience refuses.
All right, everybody.
Adults don't need my message.
Well, thank you, Mart, and thank you, Major, too. If you guys would like I said, we're selling the books outside. They can be signed by yours truly, or her. And we also, personally, I thought this was very interesting. We have a table full of her medals and a bunch of various artifacts from her time serving, and feel free to take a look at that. Feel free to come up to any of us and ask questions, concerns, comments, anything, and everybody have a safe night, have a safe drive home, and stay warm.